Hi, this is Divya, Assistant Professor, Biomedical Engineering Department in the SNS College of Technology. In this video, we are going to see about degrees of freedom and programming of the robots, right? Degrees of freedom and programming, how it has been programmed, okay? What is degrees of freedom? What is degrees of freedom? Degrees of freedom is that types of joints. It is nothing but the types of joints. How many joints are there in a robot? In human being, we used to tell this elbow, arm, these are the joints, right? Likewise, we have many joints. Likewise, in robotics, we used to tell the joints as degrees of freedom. It is named as degrees of freedom, right? The types of joints common in robots are, we have mainly three categories: linear or prismatic joint, which is also called as P joint; revolute joint, which is called as R joint; and third one is called cylindrical joint, that is combination of prismatic and revolute joint. The combination of first two, that is prismatic joint and revolute joint, is combined together to form a cylindrical joint, right? And in revolute joint, we have three categories: pure rotational joint, twisted joint, and revolving joint. Pure rotational joint, twisted joint, and revolving joint. The main three joints are linear or prismatic joint, which is also called as P joint; revolute joint, which is also called as R joint; and third one is the combination of prismatic joint and revolution joint combined together to form a cylindrical joint. In revolute joint, we have three categories: pure rotational joint, twisted joint, and revolving joint. Okay. Both the prismatic and revolute joint provides one DOF. Okay. Both prismatic joint and revolute joint provides one DOF. What is one DOF? We have only one degrees of freedom, that is only one joint, right? In cylindrical joint, which provides two joints, we have one joint in each of prismatic joint and revolute joint, and in cylindrical joint we have two joints. Types of joints. The DOF associated with the arm and body of the robots are, in degrees of freedom, we have different joints, right? First is associated with arm and body, arm and body of a robot. We have three categories in this: vertical traverse, radial traverse, and rotational traverse. Vertical traverse, radial traverse, and rotational traverse. Vertical traverse is that up and down motion. Radial traverse is in and out. Okay, and rotational traverse is that rotation of arm about the vertical axis. Okay, vertical traverse is about up and down. Radial traverse is about in and out. Okay, and whereas the rotational traverse is the rotation of arm about the vertical axis. In vertical axis way, the rotational arm of the robot will be rotate in the vertical axis, right? Next is DOF associated with the wrist and the wrist of the robot, mainly associated with wrist of the robot. Wrist roll, wrist pitch, wrist yaw. Okay, wrist roll, wrist pitch, wrist yaw. Wrist roll, rotation of wrist about arm axis. Rotation of wrist about arm axis. Wrist pitch, up and down rotation of the wrist. Wrist yaw, right and left rotation of the wrist. Okay, we have the three categories in wrist of the robots also. Wrist roll, wrist pitch and wrist yaw. Wrist roll is about rotation of the wrist about arm axis. It will rotate only in the arm axis. Okay. Next one is wrist pitch, up and down rotation of the wrist. Okay, up and down rotation of wrist. Wrist yaw, right and left. Fine. Right and left rotation of the wrist. DOF, that is degrees of freedom associated with the arms and body of the robots. Arm and body degrees of freedom and associated with wrist of the robot. In arm and body we have three categories: vertical traverse, radial traverse and rotational traverse. And whereas in wrist of the associated with the wrist of the robot we have three categories: wrist roll, wrist pitch and wrist yaw. Okay, thank you.